Hello everyone. Welcome back to Reddit Night, your favorite Reddit reading channel. Today we are taking a look at some deathbed confessions. Don't forget to like and subscribe. People who have heard deathbed confessions, what were some interesting ones? My grandma confessed to murder on her deathbed. Usually you'd think it was the pain relief, but she was such an eccentric it was actually believable. We traced all her ex-husbands, partners and any other likely candidates, and fortunately no one was missing or died an untimely death, but sometimes I wonder. My grandfather, who had not been a religious man throughout his life, stated on the second to last day he was alive that in the prior few nights he was seeing beings in the bedroom with him. He could not discern what they were, but one in particular made him very fearful. My dad had Alzheimer's and ended up in a secure ward. He was blind and almost deaf. I was visiting him one day. He didn't know who I was, but he started talking about me. He said I had done better than him in life and that he was proud of me. He was a quiet man IRL and never told me that when I was growing up. Looking back, he did things that my dumbass never realized were for me. Like, when he retired his colleagues asked what he'd like as a present. He chose a scientific calculator. This was back in the 1970s. He had no use for it. He gave it to me for university. I thought he was just passing it on, not realizing that he'd asked for it with me in mind. My grandfather admitted to me and only me that he accidentally had sex with a man. In the 60s, I made love to many, many women, often outdoors, in the mud and the rain. It's possible a man slipped in. There would be no way of knowing. My dad has a special ability to gain people's trust. In a good way. Twice now he's had instances where dying people tell him things that they feel they can't tell their family. The one case was when my aunt's mother-in-law was dying. She explained to my dad that her husband cannot live alone and that they both agree he must find a new partner after she passes. He did. He remarried within a year of her passing. At the age of 81. The family was very upset about him moving on so fast. My dad had to stand up for him and reassure them that it is what his late wife wanted. I have an amazing one. My great-grandmother lived a very long and interesting life. She was in her 20s in the Great Depression. She had a wild streak from those days that we don't know much about, to the point that we actually don't know our great-grandfather's name. Just the husband she took later. Over the course of her nearly 100-year life, she had collected owls. Literally thousands of owl figurines. She had clocks, wall hangings, pot holders, lamps, stained glass art, salt shakers, and more little figurines than you could imagine, all depicting owls. We all wondered the importance of the owls. She never talked about them, we just all knew she loved owls. Well, when she was nearing death, at the age of 98 or 99, and the docs said she had days, my grandparents went and talked to her and they asked her if she had anything she wanted to share or ask before she goes. She thought for a moment, then said, "I never understood the owls." It turns out, she didn't really give a shit about owls. Near as we could piece together, sometime in the 40s or 50s perhaps, she bought either a trivet or a set of salt/pepper shakers that were owls. Then someone got her the other. Those were the oldest owls anyone could remember. But from there, someone got her an owl to match, probably a pot holder or placemat. And all of a sudden her kitchen was owl themed. From there, it snowballed. The owls flowed like wine, baffling her for 60 years, eventually taking over as the bulk of her personal belongings. The moral is, if you're not actually into something, mention it early. I don't know if this counts as a confession, but it felt like one. My grandparents have 3 daughters. Everyone always said that my mom was my grandfather's secret favorite. He never agreed. I heard he was on his deathbed on April 6th. Went to see him on April 8th. He was scary looking and the doctor kept saying he didn't understand why he wasn't dead yet. April 9th, everyone but my mom had the chance to come and say goodbye. She doesn't drive and my dad works 10 hours away. My grandpa kept saying her name, saying. He couldn't eat or drink, so it was more like a whisper. My mom came by on the 10th. He looked at her. Smiled. Whispered, "My Amy." He closed his eyes and never opened them again. Not my story, but that of a hospice worker who spoke to my class. For those who don't know, hospice is a method of end-of-life care that focuses on alleviating the emotional and physical pain of a dying person to ease their passing rather than combating their imminent death. One of her patients was a bed-bound woman in her 90s who was generally unresponsive but had flashes of recognition and engagement. It's hard to gauge the level to which unresponsive patients are detached from their surroundings, so they encourage family members to keep their company in hopes of soothing the patient. Now this patient was from a U.S. state that prided itself on its state university, and the university's football team. The woman's family had attended this university for 4 or 5 generations. During her hospice care, however, her great-granddaughter was the first in their family to decide to go to a different school, the rival state's university, in fact. Her family was supportive of her decision but often joked about her being the rebel or Judas or what have you. One day, they were all sitting around the woman's bedside, teasing the girl about her decision. Suddenly, the patient sat up, looked at her great-granddaughter, said, "Traitor," and freaking died. Edit, wow, thank you for all the awards. I'm glad y'all enjoyed the story. I heard it 4 years ago and I still think and laugh about it often. Fui you, the hospice worker said that the family thought it was hilarious. This isn't a confession, but I just wanted to share the last thing my grandfather said to me before he passed away due to lung cancer. I was about to go to Rome for a school trip and my family told me to go to set my mind on something else for a few days. Before I left I wanted to say goodbye as it was possibly the last time I could talk to him. He told me, "Have fun boy, I'll see you next week." I went to Rome and when I came back, he was already in a deep sleep due to medication. He wanted to peacefully pass away while sleeping. I came back the next week and he was sleeping when I went to visit him. I told him everything I did in Rome even though I knew he wouldn't wake up. The next morning he passed away. My grandmother said to me, "He waited for you." I still miss him so much. My partner's grandfather never spoke about his World War II service. We are Australian. He joined after lying about his name and age so we can't find any records. He would have been 16. We do know he was in the Pacific somewhere and when he got back his lie was exposed and because he was by then 18 he was drafted under his real name, and promptly arrested. He would do anything to not get sent back to fight. He got drunk, fought and self-harmed. His adult life was spent mostly as an alcoholic and being a shit husband and father though in his later years he was able to make some good grandkids appearing softened him. In his dying hours he relived his time at war. Some things he said. "Oh God they are here. The Japs are behind us sir. Stab him, fricking stick him. Help. Medic. All around." And he also had a string of names he kept saying. Such a tortured, broken mind. When I was in hospital, the guy in the bed next to me just asked to stop taking his meds as he was ready to die. Last thing I heard him say was "There's no one waiting for me at home, so I'm going where they are." Wasn't really a shocking confession, just a lonely and heartbreaking one. My time to shine. I worked at a hospital in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, a small town near Munich for the last 14 years. My job there is not fancy at all. I move people around, throw the trash out and occasionally I take care of some handy-like work, fix a leaking shower head and stuff like that. As you can imagine, I get to see a lot of patients that come and go, some of them pass away, such as life, I guess. I remember a few instances of people confessing to me their biggest regrets. Here are some examples. An old Polish woman told me that she regretted not fricking Hitler when she had the chance, her words. I wanted to ask her about more context, but I was afraid to be honest. Another notable example was an old truck driver that used to work for an Eastern German company. He told me that he once run over some kids with his truck and was too afraid to stop and check if they were okay. Once another Polish lady told me that she used to be a prostitute during Second World War and that she slept with very high up people in the government. She told me that she did not regret that part of her life, but that she could not tell anyone and that was a heavy emotional drag. She also told me that she aborted more than 5 babies during that time. My grandfather had pretty terrible dementia and he kept making deathbed confessions as he knew he didn't have much time left. They were often about witnessing a murder and not telling anyone, but each time he confessed to us the details changed. It happened a couple of times a day over the course of his final week. We finally figured out that he would watch the local news and hear about these things happening, then would think he had actually witnessed them. I didn't see it, but my aunt watched her elderly mother fall down the stairs and confessed just before she died that she wasn't her biological mother. She told my aunt that her oldest sister was actually her mother. The sister had gotten pregnant too young and the mom said it was hers. A common way of handling it back then. She revealed it in her very last breath. Helped care for my dad as he died from cancer earlier this year. He would get agitated and reach his arms out and try to sit up. The last thing he said was "Frike." Not sure what it was referencing, pain, drugs, or war memories, but that stuck with me. He passed very peacefully in the end. My great-grandfather was in his mid-90s when he died. Health was always good, but a benign tumor deemed too dangerous to operate on at his age went septic. He was dead a week later. I went to visit him in the hospital. My family used to see him a lot, but there was a falling out between him and my grandma several years before, so we stopped seeing them. Funny enough though, I constantly ran into him at the store and we always had nice chats. Anyway, in the hospital he told me not to worry about him. Most everyone he's ever known was dead, and he was ready to die. The week he felt himself getting sick, he knew something was off and made arrangements to get my great-grandma into a nursing home. He took care of her with her Alzheimer's, so he wouldn't die until he knew she was taken care of. They were married for over 70 years. My favorite story is that every Sunday for over 50 years, he would drop my great-grandma off at church, and then sat in the car and waited for her. Hated religion, but loved his wife lol. Mother ran a nursing home growing up. From ages 5 to 10 I spent every weekend with residents. Because I was a kid, residents often confessed stuff they thought I wouldn't understand. Two stick out. One funny, one not. Woman was dying, maybe about 96. Even had her last burst of energy/life where she thought she was better. This is common. A black delivery man came with some flowers. After he left she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I can't believe I'm dying without having been with a colored man." Second one was while I was reading Bible verses to a resident. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drop that baby in the well." I didn't witness this personally as it was between my grandfather and his father. My great-grandfather was not a nice man. He beat his children. One time he beat his daughter with a table leg, and I am assuming did the same to his wife. Anyway, she left him and the kids behind. This was the 30s and I am assuming that he didn't allow her to take the kids with her, and it's not like women's rights were great back then. My grandfather left home at 8 years old and fended for himself for his entire life. On his deathbed, nasty grandpa told the boys that he had a bunch of money stashed on the old property and if they went to see him, he would tell them where it was. No one went. Edit for clarity, nasty grandpa was my great-grandfather. This wasn't a deathbed confession, but more of hospice. This man was an alcoholic. This isn't usually a problem because when in hospice you can get whatever you want as long as it is legal. But he was a violent drunk and was forbidden alcohol as a result. Anyways, between his requests for alcohol, he talked about how he and a friend got into a massive fight about land and his equipment being borrowed. As a result they haven't spoken in 20 years. He said he didn't even know why it was such a big deal and regretted being that aggressive. Basically said he missed his best friend and wished they didn't lose all those years. I wasn't there to witness her confession, but the story leading up to it is intriguing. My mom was adopted, and my grandparents never kept it a secret. They loved my mom like their own. When she was growing up, she tried to find out as much as she could about her and her adopted brother's birth parents. Back in those days though, info like that wasn't exactly the easiest to find. My mom and uncle were brought to the orphanage with little to info on each of their biological parents, or was elsewise requested to be kept secret. Eventually, my mom found enough info from notes she had gathered, like which families might have been most likely to be related to her, some property info one can find at the library, and she just sort of pieced this puzzle together over her life. At a certain point, she was able to get the names of her mother and her brother's mother. She was able to find out she was part of a big family, with lots of brothers and sisters. But, for my uncle, he found out that his mother had died not long after placing him for adoption. By the time she had gathered all of this info and found this much out, my mom was married, had my older sister and was pregnant with me. I can't remember exactly what it was she found that led to it, or if she heard something from someone, but she got a phone number. That phone number went to the house of her biological mother. She called, and the voice of a young boy answered. My mom asked for the name she knew and she hears, "Yeah, 1 second, hey mom, phone's for you." My mom and her mom talk. It wasn't an easy conversation, and I'm just gonna refer to my mom's mom as Bio-Gran from here. Bio-Gran is not comfortable with my mom contacting her, at all. She doesn't ask my mom a lot of questions, but my mom says that she was just gonna talk and if Bio-Gran wanted to hang up at any point, she could. My mom just gave her a short version of the story of her life, and then the conversation was over. Bio-Gran after that, would send letters to my mom on occasion, but Bio-Gran made a point of telling my mom she could never be found out by the rest of her family. And Bio-Gran carried that secret with her until the day of her death. One of her daughters asked her, "Will you tell us where you went when you went away that time?" And Bio-Gran finally confessed, she had gone to a home for unwed mothers all those years ago to have my mom, the child of her affair. I've met 2 of my bio-aunts, and sadly both of them passed a few years ago. But dang. TLDR, my biological grandmother had an affair with a milkman, left to go to a home for unwed mothers, had a child, did not tell her family until her deathbed. Not really a confession, but my cousin and Anna got into a car accident and he died. His friends got him to steal and vandalize so many things. They also put him in jail 4 different times. When we were in the hospital and he was about to die, his last words were, "Velp, if I go to hell, at least I'll be with all my friends. I love you." Not a confession, but still something that sticks out to me. My great-grandma was in the hospital going in and out of consciousness. While falling out of consciousness one time, she whispered, "Mama." And then she said, "It's beautiful." It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. No matter if you believe in heaven/afterlife or not, I think it's really comforting. That is it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.